Have you ever met a person who radiated evil? What were they like? Part 2. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I did a clinical assessment on a sexual sadist who had killed several people, masturbated on a dead body, and enjoyed hurting people. He had this nervous energy and excitement talking about it that was chilling. He was curious about why he was the way he was, but it didn't bother him. Creepy dude. Yep, I worked at a psych hospital for a bit and encountered a couple very evil people. The scariest were the ones who were attractive and polite and funny, but when they looked at me, I could just feel that I was nothing but prey. My mother. Spent the first 15 years of my life in hell because of her. Haven't seen or spoken to her in almost 20 years now, and I still get a cold chill down my spine when I think of her. She was very abusive and manipulative. She always told me she hated me from the time she found out she was pregnant. I believed her because her actions confirmed it. Late to the party, but my ex-wife's mother was a real nurse ratchet. Same reptilian mannerisms, same condescending voice, same hair even. It was uncanny valley kind of shit, because she was even a psychiatric nurse. Her own children told her, right before surgery to remove a golf ball-sized brain tumor, that if she wanted to make any changes to her personality, now was the time. They'd blamed all her prior shenanigans on the tumor. To absolutely no one's surprise, she came out of the other surgery with a switch she flipped to evil. She spent the entirety of my relationship with my ex trying to break us up, and for all I know, she succeeded. Every time she looked at me, it was like she just scraped me off the bottom of her shoe. When her own mother complained about the car doing funny things while she was driving, she decided her mother was just going senile and imagining things, and took away her driving privileges, and therefore her last remaining vestige of independence. Well, my ex and I discovered, around a year later, a puddle of transmission fluid on the garage floor of her grandmother's house. Turns out, the transmission had been slipping. Her grandmother died 3 years later. She changed the date of her daughter and my wedding around so many times that no one from my family was able to attend. One agreed upon date was particularly objectionable because Sundays aren't for getting married, they're for going to church. One of the best outcomes of my ex leaving me is that I'll never have to see discount nurse ratchet again for the rest of my life. Walked into a job interview, sat down across from an HR manager who had just the most scumball vibe I'd ever encountered. I'd heard the phrase, "he made my skin crawl" before, but never actually experienced it until that day. I ended up getting the job, and less than a year later, he'd been fired and charged with embezzling money from employee checks. Once he was gone, the quieter guys around the office admitted that they often felt like he was intimidating them, and a few of the women talked about how he made unwanted advances and they hadn't known what to do because he was the head of HR. Complete shit stain of a human being. I was at school with Daniel Button. There was never any doubt he was going to end up in jail. I don't think I'm the only one who's surprised he only killed one person. In fact, I would not be surprised if he killed others and wasn't caught. He might be out of jail now. I'd like to find him. Someone of the right name and age committed suicide in Banbury in 2013, but I don't know for sure it was him. Some of the life details given don't add up. My boss. She fought all the way to the top of the chain to be able to force a severely immunocompromised former coworker into working in a COVID unit. Her response to a patient punching me and me requesting to put safety flag on his chart was, "But were you actually hurt?" Along with many other shitty things she does and petty effing comments she makes daily. Everyone bolts when they see her making her rounds. She doesn't have a single ounce of kindness in her body. Kid and I shared a few classes with in middle school. I think we were both 13. He had a charming smile, but it always felt off to me, like he was wearing a mask. There was nothing in his eyes when he smiled. He was in a lot of school groups, Kiwanis, Amnesty International, 4-H, Junior Civics Club, etc. If there was something to protest, he was the most outraged. If there was something to mourn, he was the saddest. If there was something to cheer, he was the loudest. But between those times, he was blank. If you were looking, he'd have a pleasantly neutral smile on his face. However, there were a few times I caught him when he thought no one was looking and he was just empty, cold. There was something just immensely soulfully chilling about him. One day, he stopped showing up to school and no one knew why. Some of the girls in our class eventually went to his house to see if he was okay. Not me, I never wanted to be near him. Turns out, he was the reason the neighborhood cats kept going missing. He got caught skinning a cat alive in an empty lot. The poor cat's screaming caught the attention of someone, and he was busted. When they went to check his room, they found his kill list. It included every animal, all pets, that he had caught, tortured, and killed. The list was very detailed. No clue where they put him, but I sincerely hope he never gets out. My neighbor. Something was off. She was a skinny, frail, mid-30s woman with a son. The son was about 8 or 9. He was off as well. Something just not right and eerie. They were always trying to make small talk at the fence when getting into my car or in the front yard. One day the kid says, "Help, come, I think someone is trying to break in," to which I replied, "Did you call 911? He said, "No." Then I replied, "Where's your mom?" He said, "Inside." Then the kid badgered me to come inside and check. I pretty much said, "No way, your mom is in there. In my head, you guys are crazy. And if she don't care to move, then must be just fine." Anyways, they move out. A few months later, she's in the news. She had a chopped up body in her freezer. When they moved, it thawed a bit before cooling again at a new residence, and the scent drew some attention and was discovered. I can see the evil in her smile 5 years later. I haven't had this experience, but I was the person for someone once. My high school geometry teacher specifically disliked me for seemingly no reason at all, like she was just afraid of me, even though I'd done nothing to her. One day, this manifested into her calling security to remove me from the classroom because I had the eyes of a demon. It was really effing weird, but she was super religious, and I was quietly atheist and closeted, so maybe she just picked up on that and decided to give me a hard time. My stepfather was evil personified. He was an alcoholic who drank massive amounts of alcohol without passing out, and he hid his drinking from my mother before they married. He had been married 3 times before, but only told us about one. My sister, who was 14 years old, nearly 15 years old, was immediately the scapegoat and treated badly. He would watch her get into and out of the bathtub. When he put his hands down her panties and tried to rape her, she begged our mother for help. She slapped my sister for trying to steal her man. My sister was able to get an older brother to take her in, 150 miles away. That left me alone at home at almost 11. He had been trained by the Marines as an interrogator, translate to torturer. He decided to use me to maintain his skills and to toughen me up. My mother knew, actually watched and laughed. I have required multiple surgeries and lots of therapy. Eventually, my mother kicked him out. He stuffed rags into the chimney to try to kill us with carbon monoxide. He took a job at my school so that I would have to see him regularly. I think this qualifies as pure evil. My mother. She was a horrible woman. She cheated on my father for years with a man all the way across the country and would use emergency fund savings to buy her tickets. She had an excessive drinking problem and would drive heavily intoxicated with my brother and I for years. She was extremely selfish, and no one else's happiness but her own mattered to her at all. It made me very sad for so long, since she was my mother, and I wanted to look up to her as a female figure so bad, but thank God I have an amazing father and brother that are so supportive. In my eyes, I think it's pure evil to put your children at risk so recklessly, and it's something I'd never intentionally do. I hung out with someone who stabbed her boyfriend to death in a really grotesque way. She stabbed him mostly in the face and eyes, then tried to pretend she was crazy. Nope, she was just effing evil. She thought it was funny. She was glad she did it, and she said she was smarter than everyone, so she'd get away with it. She obviously didn't. She was busted immediately, tried, and sentenced to life. She was creepy AF. Constantly scared she'd come up behind me. She was an effing dangerous chameleon. Everything out of her mouth was a lie. Everything was a game. Not evil, but deadly. I was working in Afghanistan and waiting for a flight when 2 guys came in and jumped in line. They looked normal enough and were not threatening in any way, but there was just a feeling of death around them. The whole room could sense it too. It was super unnerving. Like you just knew they could kill everyone in that room without breaking a sweat. They got their assignments for a flight and left, and it was like the entire room let out a relieved sigh when they walked out of the room. Never experienced something like that in my entire life. Walking my dog. He's about 8 months old at this time, and we've had him for 4. Super friendly, total love bug, not an aggressive bone in his body. He's also still a puppy, so super bouncy and playful. Anyway, We're walking along our usual route, and my dog stops and digs his heels in. I look up, and about 50 feet away, there's a guy standing on the pavement having a cigarette. He's wearing a beanie, and my dog is a little nervous about people wearing hats. Don't ask me why. So I assume that's the problem. I crouch down and start trying to coax him forward, thinking it might be a good learning experience for him. He won't budge. Then he starts growling. Proper, angry. I'm going to bite you growling. Snout crinkled, ears back, lips drawn up, showing all his teeth. His tongue even flicks out a little bit. He's making this awful guttural snarling sound and goes into a sort of half crouch, standing himself perpendicular to me and pressing his body against my shins. I look up, and the guy with the beanie is smiling, just smiling, benignly as my dog snarls like he wants to rip his face off. I decide to bounce, but my dog won't turn his back on the guy. Instead, he walks me in a perfect half circle around him, always keeping himself between me and the guy, always growling, never taking his eyes off him. I'm shitting myself. The guy's just smiling. At last, when we're past him, he says, "Something wrong with your dog?" He doesn't like you, I say. My dog walked backwards, still growling, until we reached the corner, and all of a sudden, it was like nothing happened. He's perky and happy again, sniffing the plants, doing his thing, totally back to normal. I was terrified, LOL. I never saw that guy again, and I never saw my dog have another reaction like that.